Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Weston Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. Wes, back from Cleveland, where the Packers opened the preseason with an all-around solid, impressive performance. I thought 23-10 was the final score, but it wasn't even so much those numbers. It was everything we saw right from the beginning, where you couldn't have scripted it any better for the Packers' number one offense. 3rd and 5, just hit Dontavian Wicks for a 65-yard touchdown and call it a night.
One play, one catch, one 65-yard touchdown for Dontavian Wicks. It doesn't get much easier than that as far as his evening. But I wrote this in our Insider Inbox column. I really mean this. I mean, it's not... There's only so much you're going to be able to do as far as your scheme and what you want to run out there. It's more about, as Matt LaFleur says, going through the pre-practice process, going through your walkthroughs, being able to kind of get your process down before the game, and then going out there and building some confidence. And that's what Jordan Love and the offense did. A great throw by Jordan Love, an incredible job by Dontavian Wicks getting open on 3rd down. And then once he got that one-on-one matchup with the safety, he was off to the races, and the number one offense's night was over.
Yeah, and lost a little bit in that too, just because the Packers lost a couple yards on 2nd down. But right out of the gate, Josh Jacobs rips off a 7-yard run. You're sitting in 2nd and 3 after one play. So a good start. They got exactly what they wanted out of that. As you said, it was really more about going through all of the pregame stuff. And really the mental side of that, I think, has been Matt LaFleur's point of just getting mentally ready to play a football game, so that when it's Brazil and it's week 1 and it's against the Eagles, that whole pregame routine is not suddenly, we're starting over like this is brand new. So on the defensive side for the number one unit, a couple guys not available, but gave up a field goal to the Browns on their opening drive. But when you look at the numbers, they only gave up 27 yards. It was good field position for the Browns at the start of the drive. The field goal ended up being 55 yards, which was a heck of a kick by their kicker, by the way.
Cade York.
Yeah, that was quite the boot. But gave up 27 yards, and then from there, some of the substitutions and rotations and whatnot began. And as the game went on, I thought when you look at the bulk of the game was played with 2s versus 2s for the most part, and I thought the Packers clearly had the better depth. I think it showed. I thought in the trenches in particular, both what the Packers offensive line was doing after a couple of rough plays early on, then they settled in, and what the Packers defensive line was doing. I thought Green Bay's second units controlled the line of scrimmage both ways, and that's how the Packers ended up building a 23-3 lead, as the game went along.
Yeah, and when you look at the running totals, especially 155 rushing yards to, I believe it was 56 or 57 for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, they just dominated them in terms of being able to move the line of scrimmage, and then Emmanuel Wilson having a really good night behind it. Jarvian Howard also coming in the fourth quarter, 8 carries for 44 yards. Just really were continually able to push the line of scrimmage and move the chains. I'll say this, though. The tone changed in this game for me, and I felt like it never went back in terms of the Browns, where they did get a little bit of a series together with Jameis Winston on that first drive. But Lucas Van Ness, along with Devontae Wyatt, combined to pressure and then sack Jameis Winston on 1st down for a 7-yard loss. The Browns weren't able to get anything back from that. That's what led to the Cade York 55-yarder. Overall, I thought the Packers defensive front, Mike, and I wrote about this, or I actually said it in our final thoughts video, the Packers win this game if the defensive front keeps doing what they were doing. Now, Cleveland has some mobile quarterbacks, but when you look at Tyler Huntley, obviously Jameis, has that kind of type of versatility to his game. And then seeing them be able to pressure the way they did, and with a few exceptions, not allowing the quarterbacks for Cleveland to have much time in the pocket. 3 sacks total, 5 quarterback hits, and I just felt like Cleveland's offense was really never able to get comfortable, and that's because the Packers' defensive front was sending wave after wave. You saw it even with Brenton Cox at the end of the game. I mean, he wasn't able to wrap up the quarterback in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, but he had a really good shot at a sack there.
The pressure that he was able to generate off that, I just felt like, again, going back and schemes are vanilla, but physicality is physicality, and the Packers definitely out-physical the Browns.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. I thought Lucas Van Ness was a steady, disruptive presence out there, which you would hope and expect from a first-round pick in his second season going against reserve players. And Lucas Van Ness looked like exactly that. Devontae Wyatt, as you mentioned, he looked quick and explosive off the ball. The more we see it, the more it just seems that this defensive scheme really fits Devontae Wyatt, and he has the potential to really thrive. And then I don't know, we talk about these guys as two peas in a pod sometimes, even though they're very different players, but they were drafted together, Colby Wooden and Carl Brooks on the defensive line. Wooden got a sack in this game. I thought Brooks also, did his share of things. What the Packers have on this defensive line in terms of the rotation and the depth and everything, it really bodes well. And then when Matt LaFleur gives the halftime interview, and he basically says, well, we're just looking to get a turnover now. And then on the first play of the second half, Evan Williams, the rookie safety, coming up to make the tackle on a screen pass, which had set up pretty well for Cleveland. But boom, he's able to punch the ball out. Christian Welch, the linebacker, recovers, and right on the opening play of the second half, the Packers defense gets the turnover that it wanted. And again, another example of just when Evan Williams is on the field, he finds a way to make plays. He's always around the football. He's got that nose for it, as they say. And what we saw on the practice field for 2-3 weeks with Evan Williams obviously was not some kind of a fluke, because he goes in there, half a dozen tackles, loses his helmet on one of them, the whole thing, and gets credit with that forced fumble.
Yeah, and to have 6 tackles on 23 defensive snaps, but that forced fumble I thought was just such a heady play, because Cleveland, they had the right counter. When the Packers are being really aggressive, they're getting a lot of pressure. What do you do to kind of take the air out of the balloon a lot? You go back to the screen game, and that's what they did there. But Williams, showing the type of player he is, he not only punched it out, but talking to him in the locker room afterwards, he mentioned as soon as that ball came out, he's looking for it. As he says, though, he saw a green jersey, which was Christian Welch, jump on it. He knew they had the ball. He knew they got what they wanted out of that drive, and Green Bay was able to really just control the rest of the game from there. But Green Bay Packers, man, they overload these positions. We've talked about it time and time again in the draft, and it just seems like more often than not, they find ways to not just find one contributor out of that, but 2, sometimes even 3. And this Evan Williams kid out of Oregon, I always find these stories interesting too, because he plays at Fresno State, transfers to Oregon. He doesn't have like these monster like interception numbers, but he comes into camp for the Packers, 13 practices, 4 interceptions, then finds another way to make a play on Saturday.
Yeah, what the Packers have done at the safety position, we talked about it obviously all off season. It was a complete revamping and a reset. I mean, in terms of the guys who played the snaps at safety last year, Anthony Johnson Jr. as a rookie 7th round pick last year, he was the only one who came back. The other safeties were special teamers. They didn't really play from defense, and the rest of it, Xavier McKinney, the 3 draft picks. We haven't even seen much of Katan Oladapo yet. Hopefully, he maybe gets more of a chance to play against Denver and Baltimore in these last 2 preseason games as he tries to show what he has. But the complete overhaul of the position, at least to this point, and the Packers haven't played a game for real yet, I get that. But at least to this point, that complete overhaul of the position could not have gone any better for Brian Gutekunst and the personnel staff in terms of what they gave this new defensive coaching staff to work with.
Well, and I was asking Xavier McKinney this last week when, because he had another interception in practice off of Jordan Love, and, I didn't want to make it sound like it was too big of a deal, because it's like, it is practice, there's things happening, and I kind of cushioned my question that way. But then the way that Xavier answered it is like, no, I mean, interceptions are the most important thing. That's how you get paid in this league. And again, you will see what it looks like when you get to Brazil and when Indianapolis comes to Green Bay. But if positions or players aren't making plays and they're being quiet, that's not a good thing in training camp. The fact that all these safeties, from Anthony Johnson Jr. to the franchise addition in Xavier McKinney, the fact that all these guys have made noteworthy performances and been noticeable this offseason, I just, if you're the Packers in this defense, they didn't have a lot of holes, Mike, coming off of that run last year and the way they finished the season with how many returning players that came back. How many times did we hear Brian Gutekunst talk about how, they had 72 players, I think, on the roster before the draft. It just shows you they had so many returning bodies, very unique that they had that many guys coming back.
Function of having such a young team a year ago.
Absolutely. And they fought through that. They got through it the first half of last season, and now here they are with what appears to be a position group that they heavily invested into because they had the resources, and it's paying off.
Yeah, and Matt LaFleur said after the game that, Jeff Hafley had a pretty simple call sheet. It was very vanilla scheme-wise. It's not like he was dialing up a bunch of blitzes or anything, but that was by design, not only to not necessarily show things and put certain schemes on film, but the objective was to see what was to get the play style, the attacking, all the hats to the football kind of thing. And that's exactly how this Packers defense played, whether it was the first unit, the second unit, the third unit. That's the way they played in this preseason opener, and they got what they wanted.
And if I may add in there as well, when you're talking about the vanilla schemes and everything else, but you look at what happened where the offensive line for the Packers goes out. The second team is out there. They aren't able to get much room for A.J. Dillon. The stats are what they are. They get stuffed on fourth down.
Yeah.
But how that group settled in, how Sean Ryan settled in at center, how Jacob Monk played like 95% of the snaps, the way he performed between center and guard, you could tell the Packers with the experience level, the talent level, once they got that train moving, there really wasn't anything Cleveland was going to be able to do to stop it.
Yeah, and I like that you brought up those guys on the offensive line because that's where I was going to go next. I thought for as much as things are still very much up in the air, there's not a whole lot of clarity in terms of the backup offensive tackle. Andre Dillard, Kadeem Telfort, Caleb Jones, they all played. And the coaches are evaluating all those snaps. And there's still 2 more preseason games to go to see how that sorts itself out. But man, when you look at what Sean Ryan did with his snaps at center in this game, you look at what Jacob Monk did, the rookie out of Duke, you really have to like what the Packers appear to be developing in terms of the reserves and possibly future options, however you want to look at it, at these interior positions on the offensive line, because both of those guys definitely, I thought they were, as that number 2 offensive line, as we've talked about, settled in after, a couple of hiccups on that early short yardage sequence with Dillon. As that group settled in, I thought Ryan and Monk were kind of the anchors, in that group, in the way that they performed, the way they got after guys. We saw both of them kind of leading the way on that toss sweep that was in the red zone where Emmanuel Wilson's making his way to the outside, and you see these couple of big guys, trying to clear some bodies out in space like that. I thought that was pretty impressive, and I think it bodes well for what the Packers are developing depth-wise on that interior.
Yeah, and I wrote about Sean Ryan this week about how, he played left tackle, 31 game starter at UCLA. He comes to Green Bay. He had to learn guard. That took a full season. He was away from the team a little bit, comes back last year, and he ends up in a rotation with John Runyon, who then goes and gets a $10 million a year contract with the New York Giants. Even still, he didn't come back this offseason thinking, okay, I've just won my spot, I'm good. He knew he still had to compete. He's competing to start at right guard, and he also understood that he needed to add center to his repertoire as well. The Packers, I think, pretty well established at this point in time. You got that top 6. It's just going to be kind of a question now. Is it going to be Jordan Morgan, who's still dealing with the shoulder, or will it be Ryan at right guard?
Yeah.
Either way, Ryan gives you some versatility at interior offensive line. That's only 6 guys, though. You need 8 on the game day roster in order to get that 48 spot.
And you're most likely going to have 10 on your 53-man roster when it's all said and done.
Somewhere in that area. So that's where it comes down to, obviously, Jacob Monk being back. I thought he looked a lot more comfortable at guard. Certainly, he played a lot of center at Duke, but some of the snap stuff has been sort of a work in progress throughout camp. I thought him getting the reps at guard, you could just see that confidence build in him throughout the game. And then, obviously, at the media availability with the assistant coaches on Monday, I think Luke Butkus probably had the line of the entire presser saying that.
That's why I put it in the headline on our posting on the website.
But saying that, he was ready to go out there and rip somebody's lips off, and he played that way. So, but the swing tackle thing is still very much up in the air with Caleb Jones and Kadeem Telford, obviously Andre Dillard, the veteran, and then, trying to figure out who's going to come out through that. Travis Glover, the 6th-round pick, rookie, still in there as well for this thing. Royce Newman, veteran now in his 4th season. Figuring out how those pieces are going to fit into this offensive line are going to be critical for the Packers. And honestly, I'm very, very curious to see how all that ends up sorting itself out here the last 2 preseason games.
Yeah, I want to talk some more about some of the individual standouts on offense for the Packers, but I don't want to forget about our sponsor business here. SiriusXM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousins Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousins Subs, 50-plus years of better. All right, well, we've talked a little bit about Emmanuel Wilson already. I don't think anybody was surprised at what he did against Cleveland. He came out in that preseason opener as an undrafted rookie last year in Cincinnati and kind of lit the world on fire. And Wilson he runs hard. He did what he always does, and I believe I saw a statistic that of his 67 rushing yards, which was the high for the game, 50 of those 67 were after contact. So that says something about his style. But the other individual offensively that needs to be talked about here, of course, is wide receiver Grant DuBose. We had talked about him through the first few weeks of camp. Is he going to be able to carry over what he's been doing on the practice field into the game? And lo and behold, he did. 5 catches on 6 targets, I believe 66 yards was the number. And not just and it's not just the statistics. It was 2 really clutch catches, in my opinion, that made his night. One was on the 4th down, on the right side boundary that he makes the catch to keep the drive alive and keep the chains moving for the Packers. And then the other one was in the 2-minute drill, which was actually a 1-minute drill at the end of the first half with backup quarterback Sean Clifford, where Clifford buys a little bit of time, shifts to his left in the pocket, and he spots DuBose and he fires it right to the boundary, and DuBose does the catch with the toe drag. 23-yard gain gets the Packers into field goal range to end the first half with a field goal. Grant DuBose did what he needed to do in this very heated competition for, at the receiver position. Now Grant DuBose's next step is to do it again in Denver, right? That's what everybody's going to be looking for. Is this game by Grant DuBose just some kind of a one-off, or is he going to do this every game in the preseason and basically say to everybody, here I am, I deserve a spot on this team?
100%. And the thing that's wild, too, is he actually in some ways did that at the end of the preseason last year. It's just that he was missed 3 months with that back injury. Once he got back into games, he basically played those last 2 games cold, and he still was catching passes. So for him to come out, based again, like what we were talking about with Evan Williams, to see DuBose make these plays in this game, this wasn't out of left field. He's been doing this routinely.
For those of us who have been at practice every day, and if you've been reading our coverage of others who are on the beat, what Grant DuBose did, what Evan Williams did in this game was not a surprise to anybody who's been watching this and following along. They did what was somewhat expected of them. You just didn't really know if it would happen in a game or not.
The toe dragging catch, though, was extraordinary. And again, just the body awareness, his ability to create separation, the fact that I wrote in my story, the game notes afterwards, I mean, he's kind of like the receiver version of Wilson, where it's just the guy makes plays and he's kind of sort of making himself undeniable at this point. And the real scary thing about this is, Mike, you got to remember, he was the 3rd receiver the Packers drafted last year.
Yeah.
After Jaden Reed and Dontavian freaking Wicks.
Yeah.
I mean, if Grant DuBose, I don't want to put the cart before the horse here. I mean, there's a lot of football left to be played and he needs to make this team. But the fact that the Packers appear to have 3 guys that all can play this game at a high level, and they got them all in the same draft, Doesn't always work out like that. That's pretty extraordinary.
Well, on that toe drag catch as well, I thought it was a heck of a throw by Sean.
It was. Yep.
He put the ball right where he needed to put it, and the timing and everything with Dubose in terms of snagging it with his hands and dragging the feet. That is just how you draw it up. And those are two guys who basically, have only played in preseason games effectively to this point. I thought Sean Clifford performed well in this game. He seems to be. I don't want to make this a grand generalization after preseason game number 1 of just his second season in the league. But Sean Clifford seems to be one of these guys who performs better in games than he does in practice, and we've seen that here over the years. And it was discussed with quarterbacks coach Tom Clements yesterday that there is a little bit of reminder of Matt Flynn, who was like that too. Matt Flynn never really impressed a whole lot. I'm not saying he was a bad practice player, but he was never really all that impressive on the practice field. But then you put Matt Flynn into a game and he goes out, he plays ball, he moves.
He's a national champion.
Puts points on the board. What's that?
He's a national champion.
Yeah, that's true. Very true. And Clifford just seems to be kind of, cut from that same cloth, so to speak. So I thought he performed well.
Can I add one more thing too?
Absolutely.
I talked to Sean in the locker room afterwards. He didn't want any flowers. He wasn't looking for any bouquets. He still felt like there were some throws he missed in that game, some big splash play opportunities. What I thought was funny, though, and he kind of let this slip a little bit, he's like, if I could have done that, it might have been perfect. I mean, I really think the guy was splitting hairs in terms of, because he effectively drove the offense, and I think the most important thing with that, 3 straight scoring drives to end his night. I know they wanted touchdowns. I know they didn't want to settle for 30-plus yard field goals, right. But again, from what Sean had to deal with early in camp, where he's running with the ones, he talked about how much faster that was going with them.
And he's admitted to kind of pressing, to trying to push himself, and he was in a difficult spot. It was a big opportunity. It wasn't going as well as he was hoping it would go, and he started to press because things started to build in terms of some of the struggles that were happening. So,
long story short, with all this, just with him, Michael Pratt, the snaps that he took later on, Julian Hicks, Joe Wilson. I mean, there has been, I think what was cool about this game, in addition to the fact that everybody the Packers had active played, the fact that so many guys, whether it's the Jordan Loves of the world or the guys that are in the fourth quarter, finishing this thing out, so many guys made plays for the Packers in this matchup. Curious to see who carries it on now going into Denver.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. Whether you're talking about Grant Dubose, whether you're talking about Julian Hicks, even Evan Williams to that extent as a rookie who's still figuring things out. What are they going to do now in the second preseason game? How do they build on it? And now this second preseason game will be preceded by a joint practice against the Denver Broncos. So a whole different practice look on Friday out in Denver within the game coming up on Sunday night. But we will talk more about that on our next show, because we have to call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to continue following all of our coverage of training camp. We have it all for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.